Mark walked out of the notary's office with a light heart, already rehearsing how he would tell his daughter and son-in-law the news. His brother had left him an oceanfront villa and 2 beautiful apartments, a fortune that would completely change all their lives. He imagined Megan smiling, imagined Arnold finally calming down about money. As he drove home, he whispered, "This is our new beginning." But the moment he reached his quiet street, something shifted. His house looked the same, peaceful and ordinary, yet a strange feeling pressed against his ribs. And through the open living room window, he heard voices, sharp, urgent, and nothing like happiness. Earlier that morning, everything had begun with a simple phone call. Mark was in his home office sorting through old case files when his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Daniel Brooks?" a woman asked quickly. "This is Anna Foster, Notary Public. I need you in my office immediately. It's about your brother's estate." Her tone held the calm urgency of people who handle crises every day. Mark's chest tightened. "What happened to James?" he whispered. "Please come in," she replied. "I'll explain everything here." Then the call ended, leaving silence thick in the room. Driving downtown, Mark found his mind bouncing between memories and worry. He hadn't spoken to James in nearly 3 years. Life had pulled them apart, careers, distance, heartbreaks neither of them had known how to talk about. He still remembered their childhood summers, 2 brothers laughing over homemade forts and daring each other to jump from the old creek bridge. Now James was gone. The notary's office was small but neat, smelling of paper and polish. Anna greeted him with a firm handshake. "Mr. Brooks, please sit," she said gently. Then she opened the folder with his brother's name across the top, final and unchangeable. Anna delivered the news with steady professionalism. "Your brother passed away last week. Sudden cardiac arrest," she said softly. Mark felt the breath leave his chest as guilt rushed in. While he complained about his leaking roof, James had died alone in Florida. "I didn't know," Mark whispered. "No one called me." Anna nodded sympathetically and turned a page. "Your brother left a very specific will. Everything goes to you. The Malibu house, valued at $3.1 million. 2 rented apartments worth over $1 million combined. He wrote a note too." She slid the handwritten message forward. "For the brother who always did the right thing." Mark's hands trembled as he signed the paperwork, his heart caught between grief and gratitude. At 67, retired and living on a modest pension, he had never imagined owning millions in property. As he walked back to his car, the sun felt different, warmer, hopeful, almost dangerous. "Megan and Arnold will be thrilled," he murmured. They had been living with him for months, drowning in bad investments they never fully explained. He had helped without complaining, the way fathers do. Now he could finally lift them up. He smiled as he drove home, practicing the words, unaware that betrayal waited behind his front window. Mark turned onto his street still wearing the hopeful smile he had practiced, but it slowly faded the moment he noticed the living room window open. They usually kept the house sealed during the heat, so the small detail instantly unsettled him. He parked quietly along the curb instead of pulling into the driveway, guided by an instinct he couldn't explain. As he walked toward the house, 2 voices floated out, Megan's sharp and anxious, Arnold's low and controlled. He paused behind the overgrown bushes, heart thumping as he leaned in to listen. And the first sentence he heard made the ground beneath him shift. "If Dad finds out about our debts, we're finished." Megan's voice cracked with panic. "He can't know, Arnold. He'll throw us out. We need more time." Arnold responded with stunning calmness. "He won't find out. Not if we move fast. Tomorrow you take him to that psychiatrist I mentioned. The man will write whatever we need for $1,500 cash." Mark felt his stomach drop as he clutched his car keys so tightly the edges cut into his palm. "And what if Dad refuses?" Megan asked, sounding frightened. Arnold didn't hesitate. "Then we slip something into his coffee. Simple. Once he's sedated, no one listens to old people anyway." The words stabbed through Mark like ice. The conversation darkened further. Megan swallowed hard before whispering, "And the inheritance? The villa and those apartments." He said James left him properties. Arnold stepped across the room, pacing. "That's why we move tomorrow. Get him declared incompetent. File for guardianship. Take control of everything. Mark's heart hammered violently. Guardianship. Nursing home. Drugging him. His own daughter. The bushes pressed painfully against his back as he crouched lower, afraid to breathe. Megan spoke again, softer, uncertain. He's still my father, Arnold. But Arnold shut it down instantly. He's an obstacle. And obstacles get handled. Mark backed away slowly, careful not to rustle the branches. His prosecutor's mind, silent for months, lit up like a courtroom spotlight. Elder abuse. Fraud. Intent to drug. Unlawful guardianship. Every charge lined itself neatly in his thoughts, steadying his shaking hands. He reached his car and slid inside, holding the steering wheel as if it were the only solid thing left in his life. In the mirror, the house looked ordinary, blue shutters, overgrown lawn, the same place he'd raised Megan. But inside it, betrayal lived and breathed. "My daughter," he whispered. "My only child." Then he started the engine and drove away, needing distance before the rage swallowed him whole. He didn't know where he was driving until he saw a small, quiet park and pulled in without thinking. The air smelled of cut grass and warm sunlight. He sat on a bench beneath a giant oak tree and lowered his head into his hands. Memories crashed into him. Megan learning to ride a bike, Megan crying during her first heartbreak, Megan holding his hand at her wedding. All of it clashed with the voice he had heard moments ago, plotting to drug him like a stranger. After several minutes, he straightened, wiped his face, and breathed deeply. "Evidence," he whispered. "I need evidence. No mistakes. No emotion." The prosecutor inside him had awakened. Mark pulled out his old notepad, something he had not used since retiring, and his handwriting returned as steadily as his heartbeat. "Step 1, record everything," he murmured. "Step 2, identify the psychiatrist. Step 3, gather physical proof." He remembered previous cases he had prosecuted, sons forging signatures, daughters stealing pensions, caretakers hiding pills inside teacups. He had put people like that behind bars. Now those crimes were growing inside his own home. He looked up at the sky, the branches swaying overhead. "Let them act," he whispered. "Let them show their hands. Then I bring justice." The quiet resolve hardened inside him. He took out his phone and dialed an old colleague, Samuel Clark, a lawyer who had handled dozens of elder fraud cases with him. After a brief ring, Samuel answered. "Mark? It's been a while. Everything okay?" Mark forced his voice steady. "I need your eyes on something sensitive. Something dangerous. And I need it tonight." Samuel's tone sharpened instantly. "You sound shaken. What happened?" Mark swallowed, staring at the notepad in his hand. "My daughter and her husband are planning to drug me and declare me incompetent. They want guardianship. They want everything." Silence hit the line like a punch. "Tell me where you are," Samuel said quietly. 20 minutes later, Samuel arrived at the park and sat beside Mark on the bench, listening in silence as the entire story spilled out. Every whispered plan, every knife-edged word, every betrayal. Samuel closed his eyes slowly when Mark finished. "This is worse than fraud, Mark. This is premeditated harm. But you're doing the right thing by building a case first." Mark nodded. "If I confront them now, they'll hide everything. They'll change the psychiatrist. They'll clean their tracks." Samuel leaned back. "Then we catch them mid-crime. That's the only way. And we will." Mark felt something loosen in his chest, relief shaped like determination. They returned to Samuel's office, a quiet room lined with casebooks and framed degrees. Samuel opened a drawer and handed Mark 2 small voice recorders. "Keep one on you at all times," he instructed. "Hide the other somewhere in the living room. Those small devices pick up voices from 15 feet away." Mark turned one over in his hand. "And the psychiatrist?" Samuel shook his head. "We'll find him. Tonight." "But Mark," he paused. "Your daughter's involvement, are you ready for what this means legally?" Mark's eyes hardened. "She made her choice. And now I'll make mine." On the drive home, Mark rehearsed his expression in the rearview mirror, a tired father, worn from grief, unaware of danger. He parked and entered the house quietly. Megan immediately appeared from the hallway, her voice coated in artificial concern. Dad, you're back. Everything okay? You were gone a long time. Mark forced a small smile. Just needed some air. Needed time to think about James. Arnold stepped forward, pretending warmth. We're here for you, Mark. Anything you need. Mark nodded, feeling the recorder warm against his chest. Thank you. I appreciate that. Their eyes softened. They believed him again. At dinner, Mark watched them closely while pretending not to. Megan served him a plate of pasta, hands slightly unsteady. Arnold asked questions gently, far too gently. Did you talk to anyone today? Anyone about the inheritance? Mark shook his head slowly. No. I just needed quiet. Arnold's smile stretched. Good. Good. We just want you calm, Mark. Peaceful. Mark dipped his fork into the pasta and replied softly, I trust you both. Always have. Megan's eyes shone, but not with love, relief. They were certain he was unaware. The trap was tightening around them without their notice. After dinner, Mark slipped into the living room and pretended to browse the newspaper while secretly placing the second recorder behind a thick dictionary on the shelf. It clicked softly, unheard by the pair whispering in the kitchen. Tomorrow must go smoothly, Arnold said. The doctor will sign whatever we need. Dad won't resist. Megan whispered back, what if he remembers anything later? Arnold scoffed. The papers will say he's incompetent. His word won't matter. Mark gripped the newspaper, steadying himself as the recorder captured everything. Every sentence was a confession. Every breath was evidence. Later that evening, Megan approached his room holding a cup of tea, her face arranged into a mask of gentle daughterly affection. Dad, chamomile helps you sleep, she said sweetly. Mark smiled softly and accepted it. Thank you, sweetheart. The door closed behind her. But instead of drinking, he poured some into a glass bottle Samuel had given him. Even by scent alone, something was off, slightly bitter, strangely heavy. A sedative. A felony. He washed out the cup and returned downstairs yawning theatrically. It worked fast, he murmured, leaning on the wall. Megan smiled with quiet triumph. Good, Dad. Just rest. Back in his room, Mark locked the door and sat silently, listening through the recorder connected to his phone. Megan laughed from downstairs. He drank it, she whispered. He'll be out all night. Arnold replied confidently, perfect. Tomorrow at 10, we drive him to the doctor. Then we file guardianship immediately. Mark closed his eyes, letting the betrayal settle deep into his ribs. But there was no breaking in him anymore, only strategy. Only direction. Only justice forming step by careful step. He texted Samuel, drug collected. Full recording captured. Tomorrow will confirm everything. Samuel replied instantly, standby team ready. Mark didn't sleep. He lay awake practicing tomorrow's performance. The groggy voice, the slow walk, the confused expressions. The role of a lifetime. A necessary mask. By morning, he opened his eyes to the soft knock on his bedroom door. Dad. Megan called sweetly. Time to wake up. Big day. Your appointment is at 10. Mark sat up slowly, blinking as if emerging from heavy dreams. Appointment? Did I agree to that? Megan entered smiling. Yes, Dad. Yesterday. Don't worry. We'll take care of everything. Mark nodded gently. I know you will. His voice held truth wrapped in a lie, because indeed, they would take care of everything. And justice would take care of them. Mark dressed slowly, fumbling with his shirt buttons just enough to sell the act. When he stepped into the hallway, Megan hovered anxiously, watching every movement. Did you sleep okay, Dad? She asked. Mark rubbed his forehead. Strangely tired. My head feels heavy. Arnold appeared with a rehearsed smile. Don't worry, Mark. The doctor will help. We're doing what's best for you. Mark nodded, moving as though uncertain of his own steps. But behind the act, his mind tracked every detail. The time, the tone of their voices, the proximity of the hidden recorder still capturing everything downstairs. They drove through the city with Arnold behind the wheel and Megan in the passenger seat, whispering to each other between forced questions to Mark. Did you remember to bring the documents? Megan murmured. Yes, Arnold replied. He won't understand what they mean anyway. Mark watched their reflections in the front window, both smiling nervously, both convinced the plan was already won. He turned his gaze outside, spotting a familiar gray sedan several cars behind them. Samuel's team. Silent protection. Quiet justice. Mark exhaled slowly, relieved. Are we almost there? He asked softly. Yes, Dad, Megan answered. Almost. The building they arrived at looked nothing like a medical clinic. The paint peeled from the walls, the signage faded, and the hallway smelled of dust and chemicals. Mark hesitated before stepping inside. This doesn't look like a doctor's office, he murmured, still acting dazed. Arnold placed a firm hand on his shoulder. It's a consulting clinic, Mark. Small but good. Now let's get this done. A thin man in a white coat stepped out of a back room, Dr. Martin. His eyes shifted nervously from Arnold's face to Megan's, then briefly to Mark. Come in, he said. Let's talk privately. Inside the exam room, Dr. Martin asked simple questions: date, location, names of his children. Mark answered them slowly, sometimes pausing too long, sometimes pretending to forget, sometimes looking to Megan for help. This is normal, Megan said softly. He gets confused often. Dr. Martin nodded sympathetically, writing notes he had clearly prepared in advance. Then he whispered to Arnold, I'll provide the evaluation paperwork shortly. Arnold smiled tightly. Good. We just want to keep him safe. Mark studied the doctor's trembling hands. Corruption always left a stain, and fear always revealed guilt. He waited for the final piece of the crime. After the short, shallow evaluation, Dr. Martin stepped out and returned with a stack of forms. These documents certify cognitive decline, he explained. They recommend immediate guardianship for safety. Megan took the papers eagerly. Arnold reached into his jacket and pulled out a white envelope, the agreed payment. Here's the consultation fee, he said. The doctor extended his hand without hesitation. At that exact moment, Mark glanced toward the door and saw movement, a shadow shifting. Samuel's team was ready. The trap had reached its closing point. His heartbeat steadied. This was it. The moment justice stepped into the room. The exchange had barely completed when the exam room door burst open with sudden force. Police. Nobody move. Officer Taylor's voice boomed through the cramped space as two uniformed officers stepped in behind him. Dr. Martin dropped the envelope instantly, bills scattering across the floor like guilty confetti. Megan froze mid-breath. Arnold lifted his hand slowly, eyes wide with shock. What is this? He stammered. Officer Taylor raised his badge. This is a criminal investigation. You are all to remain where you are. Hands visible. Megan turned to Mark, confused, panicked. But Mark only watched her quietly, his expression unreadable. Detective Harris entered the room next, her voice calm but firm. Arnold Pierce, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder fraud, attempted administration of a sedative, and bribery of a medical professional. She stepped toward him with handcuffs ready. Arnold's face twisted into desperation. This is a misunderstanding. We were helping him. He's sick, asked the doctor. But Dr. Martin backed away, shaking. I want a lawyer. I'm not saying anything. Detective Harris turned toward him. Dr. Martin, you are under arrest for falsifying medical documentation and accepting a bribe. Put your hands behind your back. Finally, Detective Harris faced Megan. Megan Pierce, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder fraud and participating in an attempt to chemically incapacitate your father. Megan took a step toward Mark, tears forming. Dad, please. This can't be happening. You know we wouldn't hurt you. Please tell them. Mark looked at her, his heart caught between justice and heartbreak. I heard everything yesterday, he said softly. Every word through the window. Megan's lips parted in shock. You heard. Mark nodded. I recorded it all. You were willing to drug me, Megan. You were willing to throw me away. As the officers handcuffed her, Megan shook her head over and over, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dad, we were desperate. We needed money. Arnold said it was the only way. I didn't want to really hurt you. Mark looked away. Her excuses were too late. You planned to steal my life, he whispered. That isn't desperation. That's betrayal. Arnold shouted from the corner, this is all your fault, Megan. You didn't stick to the plan. But the officers silenced him. The room echoed with handcuffs clicking shut, an iron soundtrack to the consequences they had earned. When they escorted Megan and Arnold out of the building, Samuel entered the room and placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. It's over, he said quietly. The evidence is airtight. They won't escape this. Mark nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle on him, not relief, not victory, but something heavier. The doctor was being led away as well, head bowed, future ruined. Mark walked into the hallway and watched the officers guide his daughter into the police car. She looked at him one last time, pleading silently. But Mark remained still. Justice had to happen, he whispered. Even when it hurts. The police cars pulled away one by one, lights flashing against the cracked walls of the old building. Mark watched them disappear, feeling the world fall strangely quiet. Samuel stood beside him, hands in his pockets, saying nothing at first. Finally, he asked, do you want to head home? I can follow behind you. Mark nodded slowly, though his legs felt heavier than they ever had. Yes, let's go. As he walked toward his car, he felt something hollow inside him, something like a door closing. He had saved himself. He had protected his future. But he had lost something he could never replace. The drive home felt longer than usual, even with Samuel following closely behind. Mark glanced at the passenger seat where Megan used to sit during their father-daughter rides. He remembered her laughter, her stories about school, the way she once leaned her head on his shoulder when she was afraid. Those memories pressed into him with quiet weight. When he reached his house, he stepped out and looked at the familiar blue shutters. They seemed smaller somehow, older, as if they had aged with him through the day's events. Samuel approached gently. I'll help you inside, he offered. Inside the house, silence greeted them. No noise from the kitchen. No footsteps upstairs. No soft singing from Megan as she cooked. The emptiness felt alive. Mark sat at the dining table, the same place where he had listened to them plotting. He placed both hands on the wood surface and whispered, "It was my home. Now it feels like evidence." Samuel pulled out the chair beside him. "Mark, what you did was necessary. They were dangerous. If you hadn't acted, they would have taken everything, even your freedom." Mark nodded, though it didn't ease the ache in his chest. After a few minutes, Samuel brought out the sealed bottle containing last night's tea and placed it on the table. "This goes into the case file Monday morning," he said. "The prosecutor will present it alongside the recordings." Mark stared at the cloudy liquid, remembering how Megan's voice had sounded when she offered it. Soft. Sweet. Deadly. "I never thought she could do this," he whispered. "Not Megan. Not my little girl." Samuel sighed deeply. Sometimes desperation changes people. Sometimes greed reveals who they already were. Mark looked away, unable to respond, his heart splitting quietly inside him. That evening, Mark gave his official statement at the police station. He reviewed each recording, each detail, each timeline with the same precision he had used during his years as a prosecutor. Detective Harris listened attentively, occasionally nodding. "Your documentation is exceptional," she said. "You've essentially built the entire case yourself." Mark nodded. "I've had practice." When they finished, she added gently, "I'm sorry about your daughter. Betrayal like this leaves scars you don't see at first." He thanked her and left the station feeling both lighter and heavier, a paradox he couldn't fully understand. By the time Mark returned home, the sky had turned deep blue. He heated a simple dinner, just soup and bread, though he barely tasted any of it. He walked through the quiet halls, pausing at Megan's room. The door stood open, revealing the bed she had slept in as a teenager. Old trophies still sat on the shelf, spelling bees, science fairs, school plays. Mark touched one gently, tracing her childhood handwriting. "Where did we lose each other?" he whispered. The house didn't answer. It simply held his grief in its walls like an echo that never stopped repeating. Later that night, Mark sat in his recliner with the lamp glowing beside him. He thought of the Malibu villa his brother had left him, the 2 apartments, the unexpected wealth waiting to change his life. But none of it felt celebratory. Not tonight. Instead, he felt the weight of responsibility, the need to rebuild his life with caution, with wisdom, with dignity. Samuel called to check on him. "You're not alone, Mark," he said gently. "I'm here. And the law is on your side." Mark exhaled slowly. "Thank you. Maybe tomorrow. I'll feel better. Tonight just hurts." Morning arrived quietly. Sunlight moved softly across the living room floor. Mark dressed and poured himself a clean cup of tea, nothing hidden inside this one. As he drank, he looked around the room that had once held so much laughter. Today it held something else: resolution. Megan and Arnold would face court. They would answer for every decision they made. And Mark, though wounded, would not allow their choices to define the rest of his life. "I survived," he whispered. "I'm still here." It wasn't triumph. It wasn't joy. But it was truth. He called the notary, Anna Foster, that afternoon. "I want to finalize all estate matters," he told her. "And I need to update beneficiaries." Her voice softened. "Of course, Mr. Brooks. I'm very sorry about what you're going through." Mark nodded as though she could see him. "Thank you. It's time to move forward." He hung up and walked out to the backyard, where an old oak tree stood tall. The same tree where Megan had played as a child. He rested a hand on its trunk, feeling the rough bark. "You watched her grow," he whispered. "And you watched her fall." That evening, Mark sat on his porch as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. The neighborhood was calm, the air cool, the world strangely peaceful after such chaos. He let out a long breath, accepting the truth he could no longer change. "Justice happened," he said softly. "Even when it hurt. Even when it cost me everything." But as he looked out at the quiet street, he felt something new rising inside him. Not grief, not anger, but a gentle strength. He had survived betrayal. He had chosen truth. And tomorrow, he would begin again. If you like this story, please subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments.